In a remote African village nestled between towering mountains and lush forests, a legend had been passed down through generations. The villagers spoke of a magical calabash, a god with the power to bring fortune to whoever possessed it. This calabash was said to be hidden deep within the sacred forest, guarded by ancient spirits. Many had tried to find it, but none had ever returned. The village was peaceful, but the people were poor, struggling to grow enough crops to survive. Their hopes lay in the old stories, and the belief that one day, the calabash would be found and bring prosperity to their land. The village elders spoke of signs that would appear when the time was right, but until then, the calabash remained a distant dream. One night, a young man named Kofi had a vivid dream. In it, he saw the sacred forest bathed in golden light, and at the center of a clearing, the magic calabash floated in the air, surrounded by the spirits of his ancestors. They spoke to him, urging him to find the calabash and use its power to save the village. When Kofi awoke, he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. He knew that the time had come to search for the calabash. But he also knew the dangers that lay ahead. No one had ever returned from the sacred forest. Despite this, Kofi was determined. He would find the calabash and bring fortune to his people, no matter the cost. Kofi shared his dream with the village elders, who listened with grave expressions. They had long awaited a sign that the time was right to seek the calabash, and Kofi's dream seemed to be that sign. The eldest of them, Nana Kwame, spoke of the dangers that awaited Kofi, but also of the great reward that could come if he succeeded. The council deliberated for hours, weighing the risks and the hopes of the entire village. In the end, they agreed to support Kofi's quest. The villagers, hearing the news, gathered to offer their prayers and blessings. They provided Kofi with provisions for his journey and a small charm believed to protect him from evil spirits. With the blessings of the village, Kofi set out on his journey to the sacred forest. The path was treacherous, winding through dense jungles, across rushing rivers, and up steep mountains. Along the way, Kofi encountered various challenges: wild animals, treacherous weather, and the constant threat of losing his way. Despite the hardships, Kofi pressed on, guided by the memory of his dream and the hopes of his people. He knew that the journey would only get more difficult as he approached the sacred forest, but he was determined to succeed. As the days passed, the landscape grew darker and more foreboding, signaling that he was nearing his destination. As Kofi entered the sacred forest, the air grew thick with a strange, magical energy. The trees were ancient, their branches twisting together to form a canopy that blocked out the sun. The forest was eerily silent, with only the sound of Kofi's footsteps disturbing the peace. Suddenly, the silence was broken by whispers in the wind. Kofi stopped, his heart pounding as ghostly figures began to materialize around him. These were the guardian spirits of the forest, protectors of the magic calabash. They surrounded Kofi, their voices echoing in his mind, testing his resolve and questioning his intentions. The guardian spirits challenged Kofi, testing his courage and determination. They conjured visions of his deepest fears: wild animals attacking him, the path home disappearing, and the villagers turning against him. Kofi struggled to maintain his composure, knowing that this was a test he had to pass to prove himself worthy of the calabash. Drawing on the strength of his ancestors and the hope of his village, Kofi faced each vision head-on. He reminded himself of his purpose, refusing to be swayed by the illusions. Gradually, the visions began to fade, and the spirits, seeing his unwavering resolve, acknowledged his bravery. Having passed the spirit's test, Kofi was allowed to continue deeper into the sacred forest. His next challenge was the Forbidden River, a wide, fast-flowing river that was said to be impossible to cross. The water was dark and turbulent, and Kofi knew that one misstep could sweep him away. As Kofi stood on the riverbank, contemplating how to cross, he remembered the charm given to him by the villagers. Holding it tightly, he stepped into the water. To his amazement, the river began to calm, the water spatting just enough to reveal a narrow path across. With cautious steps, Kofi made his way to the other side, feeling the presence of the spirits guiding him. After crossing the forbidden river, Kofi found himself in an enchanted clearing. The air was filled with the scent of exotic flowers, and the ground was covered in a carpet of soft, vibrant moss. In the center of the clearing, bathed in a warm, golden light, was the magic calabash. Kofi approached the calabash with a mixture of awe and reverence. It was more beautiful than he had imagined, its surface intricately carved with symbols that seemed to glow with an inner light. As he reached out to touch it, the spirits appeared once more, this time in a circle around the clearing, their expression solemn. The spirits spoke in unison, their voices echoing through the clearing. They told Kofi that the calabash held great power, but it must be used wisely. The calabash would grant the village fortune, but only if Kofi remained pure of heart and used the gift for the good of all. If he or anyone else tried to use the calabash for selfish purposes, its magic would turn against them. Kofi vowed to honor the spirit's words and use the calabash for the benefit of the entire village. The spirits, satisfied with his promise, granted him their blessing. They told him that as long as he remained true to his word, the calabash would bring prosperity to his people. With the magic calabash now in his possession and the blessing of the spirits, Kofi began the journey back to his village. The path that had once been treacherous now seemed less daunting, as if the forest itself was guiding him home. The calabash glowed faintly in his hands, filling him with a sense of peace and purpose. As Kofi retraced his steps, he noticed that the challenges he had faced on his journey seemed to have eased. The once turbulent river was now calm, and the dense jungle seemed to part before him. It was as though the forest recognized the power of the calabash and was helping Kofi return safely. When Kofi finally reached the edge of the forest and saw his village in the distance, his heart swelled with pride and relief. He had succeeded where so many before him had failed. Now, it was time to fulfill his promise and use the calabash to bring fortune to his people. As Kofi approached the village, the people saw the glowing calabash in his hands and erupted in celebration. The news of his success spread quickly, and soon the entire village gathered to welcome him home. The elders, who had awaited his return with bated breath, greeted him with tears of joy and pride. Kofi presented the calabash to the village, recounting his journey and the words of the spirits. The villagers were awed by the power of the calabash and grateful for Kofi's bravery. They prepared a grand feast in his honor, and the village was filled with music, dancing, and laughter late into the night. But even amid the celebrations, Kofi remained mindful of the spirit's warning. He knew that the calabash's power must be used carefully, and he resolved to ensure that its magic would benefit all the villagers equally. The day after the celebration, the village elders gathered with Kofi to decide how to use the calabash's power. They agreed to start with the village's most pressing need, water. The village had long suffered from a lack of clean, abundant water, which made farming and daily life difficult. Kofi, following the guidance of the spirits, placed the calabash at the village's central well and spoke a prayer. The calabash began to glow brighter, and suddenly, water began to flow from the well, clear, pure, and more abundant than ever before. The villagers watched in amazement as the water flowed freely, filling their pots and containers with ease. This was the first miracle of the calabash, and it transformed the village overnight. With an ample supply of water, the crops flourished, and the village's livestock grew strong and healthy. The villagers could hardly believe their good fortune, and they praised Kofi and the magic calabash for their newfound prosperity. With an abundant supply of water, the village's crops began to grow at an astonishing rate. The fields, which had once yielded only meager harvests, were now lush with thriving plants. The villagers worked together to tend the fields, and soon they were harvesting more food than they had ever seen. The calabash's magic extended beyond just providing water, it seemed to imbue the soil with fertility and the plants with strength. The villagers were able to grow a variety of crops, from staples like maize and yams to fruits and vegetables that had previously struggled in the arid soil. As the first bountiful harvest was brought in, the village held another celebration, this time to give thanks for the abundance that the calabash had provided. The elders reminded everyone of the importance of sharing their good fortune with neighboring villages, and Kofi led an effort to distribute some of the surplus food to those in need. As the village's prosperity grew, the elders gathered to discuss how best to manage the wealth brought by the calabash. They knew that with great power came great responsibility, and they wanted to ensure that the calabash's magic was used wisely and sustainably. Nana Kwame, the oldest and wisest of the elders, proposed that the village establish a council to oversee the use of the calabash. This council would be responsible for making decisions about how the calabash's magic should be used, ensuring that it benefited everyone and did not lead to greed or selfishness. The villagers agreed, and the council was formed, with representatives from every family in the village. Kofi was appointed as the head of the council, a role he accepted with humility. Under his leadership, the council began to plan how to use the calabash's magic to improve the village's infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Word of the village's newfound prosperity began to spread beyond its borders, reaching neighboring villages and even distant lands. Curious and envious outsiders started to arrive, seeking to learn the secret of the village's success. Some came with peaceful intentions, hoping to trade and share in the wealth, while others had more sinister motives. The council welcomed the peaceful visitors, sharing their surplus food and teaching them better farming techniques. However, they were wary of those who seemed too interested in the calabash itself. Kofi, remembering the spirit's warning, made sure that the calabash was kept safe and its magic used only for the good of the village. Tensions began to rise as some outsiders tried to convince the villagers to sell the calabash or use its magic for their personal gain. The council had to navigate these challenges carefully, ensuring that the village's newfound wealth did not lead to greed or conflict. As more outsiders arrived, the village began to experience the first signs of trouble. A group of traders from a distant land arrived with gifts and promises of wealth, but their true intentions were to take the calabash for themselves. They tried to sow discord among the villagers, spreading rumors that Kofi and the council were hoarding the calabash's magic for their own benefit. The rumors began to take root, and some villagers, blinded by greed and jealousy, started to question the council's decisions. They demanded that the calabash be used to grant individual wishes, believing that they deserved more than what they were receiving. The unity that had once defined the village began to fray. Kofi, sensing the growing unrest, called a meeting of the council and the entire village. He reminded everyone of the spirit's warning and the importance of using the calabash's magic wisely. But the seeds of doubt had been planted, and not everyone was willing to listen. One fateful night, a small group of villagers, driven by greed and influenced by the traders, decided to steal the calabash. They believed that if they could control the calabash, they could make themselves rich beyond their wildest dreams. They waited until the village was asleep and then snuck into the sacred hut where the calabash was kept. As they approached the calabash, its glow began to dim, as if sensing the evil intentions of those who sought to take it. Undeterred, they grabbed the calabash and fled into the night, believing they had secured their fortune. But as they crossed the village's boundary, the calabash's magic turned against them. The spirits, angered by the betrayal, unleashed a powerful storm. The thieves were caught in the storm's fury, and the calabash was swept from their hands, disappearing into the darkness. The next morning, the village awoke to find the calabash missing and the thieves nowhere to be found. The news of the calabash's theft spread through the village like wildfire. Panic and despair took hold as the villagers realized the gravity of the situation. The once thriving fields began to wither, and the well that had flowed with abundance started to dry up. The village was plunged into a deep crisis, and the blame game began. Kofi was devastated by the loss of the calabash and the betrayal by his fellow villagers. He called an emergency meeting of the council, urging everyone to stay calm and work together to find the calabash. But the village was divided, with some blaming the council for not protecting the calabash better, while others accused the thieves of bringing ruin upon them all. The village elders, seeing the dire state of their people, prayed to the spirits for guidance. They knew that the only way to restore the village's prosperity was to find the calabash and make amends with the spirits. Kofi vowed to lead a search party to recover the calabash and restore the village's fortune. Determined to find the calabash and restore his village, Kofi assembled a group of trusted friends to join him on the search. Watch out for the next episode of this beautiful story. Do well to subscribe and share this video with your friends and turn on your notification. Next video is dropping soon. Comment next if you want it. Thanks for watching. We love you.